Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 9. It's called Force of Nature. So spoilers for the episode as always, and this one is about Data training his cat until halfway through the episode when suddenly it's not about that anymore. And then that's never brought up ever again. Is it clear that I think this episode's a mess? Connor, your thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking the same because I had forgotten what this episode was about. Like, we always say, what it is, but I don't really remember by the time I'm watching it.
Yeah.
Usually though, 5-10 minutes in, it comes back to me because it'll start doing things about, yes, that's what this was. This one, it wasn't until right near the end where I went, oh yeah, this is the one where I said that it could be doing that sort of message. And I guess technically it is there at the very end, but wow, it's really late before it gets to anything.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole thing, because the description we read last time was, two aliens, sort of illegally jump onto the ship and try to tell the crew, tell Picard, hey, warp drives are destroying space and our planet and blah blah blah. Those two characters don't appear on the ship until about 20 minutes into the 45-minute episode. We spend so much time doing other things before then. It kind of plays out like, we're looking for a missing, I guess a medical ship they say they're looking for. And they establish a decent enough idea where there's this part of space where because of the tachyons moving around or something, blah, I don't know, whatever. That's the other thing. This episode has so much technobabble to explain so many things constantly as they keep changing that it's actually too much at a point where I'm just like, okay, this is just a bunch of fluffy dialogue now that means nothing. But they do a simple visual though early on to set up this idea. There's like a safe corridor where you can travel through at warp drive, but you can't go in these other areas. And it's during this sort of long tunnel, which is like 12 light years long, where the medical ships went and disappeared. And there may have been a Ferengi ship around as well. Could they be responsible? Could they be up to something? And that's what the episode's about, whilst we're also doing the subplot of Data's trying to train his cat. And then, all of a sudden, it's about these two aliens saying that, hey, warp drives are destroying space-time fabrics and whatnot, and our planet's going to eventually die because of it, and they're trying to convince the crew. So, it's a bit of a mess, structurally, from that point of view, even before we get into kind of specific issues with the plot. I also think that, while Star Trek often has a message to say, and sometimes they're a little on the nose, I think this is one of the worst ones they've ever done in terms of, I really felt at the end, it's the final scene with Picard and Geordi, where Picard just says, hey Geordi, let me just explain this message for the audience at home, just in case they didn't get it. And then he spells out the core idea that is, obviously tying into climate change and what we are doing to the planet. And the sad part is that there's a moment earlier on in the episode that I thought was almost hitting on the angle they should be going in with it, that I thought could be good. There's a moment where, there's a big sort of moment where one of the two aliens actually commits suicide to convince everyone that this is happening. And I shouldn't have said that word because YouTube's starting to demonetize videos for the S word. But hopefully my accent disguised it. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
There's a few key words that they're doing, like that,
is it not still if it's in within the first minute or whatever it is, or is it just now?
I think once we might get away with, but I think if you say it a bunch of times, they assume you're really talking about a subject, and they'll just advertisers don't want that. They don't want you talking about ending of one's life. They don't want you talking about someone shooting a lot of people. So again, I'm avoiding the name for it because I've been seeing YouTube videos bleep out these terms because YouTube will just which is stupid because in the context of talking about a TV plot, whatever, but anyway. So she makes this big thing, right, to prove that this warp thing will cause a rift in space and time, and it does, right? And there's a little scene with Geordi afterwards with Data where Geordi's like, you know what, I didn't want to believe her, and I got kind of not aggressive, but I really kind of poo-pooed it and said, no, that's not possible. And maybe I have to accept that I was getting defensive because I was taking it personally, because if warp drives were doing something bad, it means that I've been doing something wrong all this time, and I didn't want to believe that, right? And I thought for a second, this is an interesting angle to take, it's in a large scale way, it's about climate change, but more specifically, it's about the idea of just a human being not wanting to accept that they've been part of something and trying to basically ignore it and say it's not a problem, because then it means they don't have to take responsibility, and have a character kind of go through that and sort of realize that and learn that about themselves. And I think you could tell an interesting little nuanced story about, you know, being able to accept that and grow. But it's like one fleeting moment where I'm like, that's an idea, and then obviously the episode just has other things that it's doing.
There's a couple of moments like that for me where if you cut, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes off the start, you could have more time to explore some of this stuff later on. But one of my favorite moments that I wish they'd gone further into was actually right at the end. It's after, so everything's happened. They're like, okay, we can't really be doing warp here because we are going to make things worse. And they get a message through from the Federation being like, okay, these are the guidelines.
Oh, I know what moment you're going to say you like, because I actually like this moment as well.
And it says, oh, okay, go at warp 5 maximum. And all of them look kind of horrified that they're still using warp 5. They're still going through this tunnel.
Yeah, that's still far too much. Like, the first part about only essential travel only, okay, right? Makes sense. But you can still go warp 5. And then obviously there's the added on part where it's like, yeah, but all the other races adhere to this. Possibly not. We just have to hope they see why they should.
And warp 5's kind of still a lot. I think I really like this one, especially in regards to, because at this point in the episode, it's finally like hitting on that climate change stuff.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, sure, we're going to take it, like, you know, no, we're going to take it seriously. We're going to limit things, but we're not really limiting them enough even now. You know, like we go, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, but it's never enough. It's not a hard enough line, and this really hit on that. And I liked the reaction everyone had to that moment, like visually.
Like, as much as we're describing all the other things around it, that moment where he says, because he pauses before he says that, oh, warp speeds are limited to 5, and then they all look at each other like, oh no, that's actually still quite bad. But they don't acknowledge it, they don't say it. They just all look at each other like, oh, we all know that's bad.
And it's a great moment. I wish, again, if we'd had a bit more time afterwards, I would have cut, you know, a lot of the stuff from the start and had some debate around this part. Like, okay, these are the proposed measures, and then have some debate, especially with the alien who it's his planet that this is affecting. Have him involved in this discussion a bit more as to, does he think this is enough? What would he like to see happen?
Yeah,
I just felt like there's so much more they could have done with this at the end if we hadn't waited.
Having said that, I do kind of like the idea that it is unspoken. That it is just this awkward moment of like acknowledgement between everyone, or not even acknowledgement, just they all know it. They're all thinking the same thing, but they just have to kind of like, you know, strength on through and just kind of roll with it. I kind of like that, but I think the problem for me though is just how on the nose a lot of the other things get. Like, for example, when the alien's showing like, here's what it'll be like in 10 years, here's what it'll be like in 20 years, and I'm like, yeah, this is just this is the science teacher showing the thing, and it feels a little bit too much. And the final, because I think this show has had some really good final moments. Like the one that's sticks out in my head is between Picard and Worf. This was the episode in season 4, I believe, where it was the grandson of the Romulan was on trial, and it was this witch hunt sort of episode. And Worf kind of became very pro witch hunting in that episode. And at the end, he's kind of admitting to Picard, like, you know, oh, I was in the wrong. And Picard gives him this little speech about how, we didn't just perfect everything and now everything's hunky-dory forever. This idea that hatred and prejudice can return is always present, and we have to always be vigilant, and we have to always watch ourselves. And it was a really great little capper speech that added a little extra layer to the message of the episode and felt like it was really going out on a high note. And I felt like this one here between Picard and Geordi just felt like it was so on the nose and relevant to the time it was in a way that just was unappealing to, like, it felt like a PSA by the time he was done talking, where he's like, all my life I've been traveling space, and to think that I have been damaging the thing I love. I don't know, it just all felt a little bit hokey to me.
Clear on that as well. Like, it felt like for large portions of this episode they were saying only this specific area is this susceptible, not everywhere. So I don't know, like, how much damage have you really caused, Picard? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it sounds like it's only because of, you know, the same thing that made this corridor be the safe route is that all the stuff in this area is what's getting affected by it. It doesn't sound like it's but I suppose there's always a chance that other areas could become like this area, maybe, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I the intention is admirable, but it just, I think it's a bit more on the nose and hokey than the messages tend to be, and I usually like the messages in Star Trek, and I think in particular, you add that onto the fact that it's such a weird structured episode that spends a lot of time doing other things, which is actually the other big problem with it, is that the two aliens that come on board, by the time the sister, who's like adamant that they need to take action and that we don't have time for more research, by the time she makes her big choice to go out and do this big thing to sacrifice herself, like, we've spent almost no time with her to actually like care or get, like, a couple of quiet moments with her where she seems scared or something, but all we ever get is the angry scientist. That's all we ever get, and we only get a few scenes of that even. So they're just not developed enough for that sacrifice to really mean that much to us.
It's such an annoying episode because, like, structurally, like it's like I say, it's a mess. You got the stuff at the start with the cat, which is enjoyable enough, but it's intro fluff, and it goes on way too long. It has too much of the episode dedicated to it.
I thought it was just the opening. I thought, because sometimes they do that open where the opening has nothing to do with the rest, and it's just a fun little gag, effectively. Yeah. But then they brought it back, and Geordi and Data kept talking about training the cat, and it was this running thing. Now, admittedly, I do think the last thing with it is a funny little moment where Geordi kind of notices that the cat's trained Data to respond to whatever the cat wants, which is a cat owner. I think it's quite funny because, you get to used to like what the cat wants depending on the context of the meows and whatnot. But and Data's reaction to that moment I thought was funny.
Looking quite embarrassed.
I think like instead, I mentally it wouldn't have fit at the end of this like serious message at the end, but I think typically what they should have done with this subplot is you have the opening scene more or less what it is, and you just have that final scene of the cat plot as the little epilogue at the end of the episode. A little joke at the end after we've had our main story, and that would be fine. But no, they take several episodes of this, and they also take several scenes where Geordi's talking about having a friendly rivalry with like the captain on this other ship, the Intrepid, I want to say it was. He's trying to like just these numbers, what they're the efficiency of the engines is like just a little bit
better.
Yeah.
Again, it's like, all right, fine, whatever. And then you have the stuff where they come across the abandoned Ferengi ship. Well, I say abandoned, damaged.
Yeah, it's not the crew's on board. They're just they're adrift.
Yeah. I actually really like this whole bit. I think this is some of the strongest stuff in the episode. I think, the back and forth, the Ferengi shooting at them, the mystery at first.
It just has very little to do really with anything else after.
Yeah. Exactly. This is common. I'm going to like. It's really good. But okay, just cut most of it out if you needed to. And then you have the stuff with the two aliens, which doesn't get the time it needs to be good. And then you have all the stuff where they're just trying to escape the warp hole.
Yeah. There's so much dialogue.
Like 5 to 10 minutes of them just trying to escape this thing, and boring.
Yeah, that was really boring, especially because it was mostly just dialogue about, okay, we can't fire a warp core in there because this rift is there now, but we can fire a warp pulse to like make us get momentum going in, and we can ride that through, but then something goes wrong in the middle. Oh, what do we do now? Oh, we have to try and ride the wave. Let's surf this cosmic wave out of the... And it's all just gobbledygook that really... It's not really what the episode was about, or what it's trying to be about, at least towards the end.
It has no stakes to it, not really. It has no real relevance to the point and the message, because it's just like there as essentially the action sequence of the episode.
Well, it's the same as much as the
interesting to watch.
Yeah, as much as the Ferengi stuff is a bit more entertaining because it's just fun seeing like Picard have to deal with one of them. Like all that section really was about was this idea that for traditional episode tension, we have to believe there's a bad guy who did something to the ship they're looking for. So it's about who did it. Because that's what they're selling the episode on at that point, is the mystery of who the villain is that took out this ship. What's the mystery here? And when we kind of get to everything, it's not really about the mystery of... I mean, yes, obviously, it's one of the like outpost science things that have done it to the ship that these scientists have put in the corridor, right? And that's what's caused it. But the fact that when they're escaping everything and they're talking about rescuing the people on this science or this medical ship that they've been looking for, we never even get a single scene of a survivor who's beamed across board. It's literally just dialogue of them saying, have they all beamed across? Yep, okay, we can go now. Like, we never even saw the ship. We never saw a single survivor from the ship. Why should we care about this? It's purely a theoretical ship they're saving, because we never actually get anything from it.
But it's fine. We've got a big purple glow to run away from for 10 minutes.
Yes, so we do that. Yeah, and I get that the Geordie stuff with him, like the friend, because I thought the important part of that plot early on was going to be, whatever he's going to learn is going to put in perspective a friendly rivalry. That idea of competition might be, and it ends up being more that, that's all about making the warp drive better, and then he feels guilty about using warp drives. Whereas I thought that the friendly competition element was going to be the important thematic thing leading into the second half of the episode, because that's what it seemed like. That's the main thing I was getting from it, was this idea of now whether or not it was going to be a good thing near the end or a bad thing. I thought maybe Data would engage in some friendly rivalry because he's learned it from Geordie or something, and something would come of that, or anything. Yeah.
Such a disjointed episode.
Yeah, it feels like 3 different episodes that were all just kind of cobbled together.
I think the most frustrating part is the main point of the episode, the bit that should be, the meat and potatoes. This is what it's about. Is probably the worst part.
It's the worst part overall, but it has like the 2 best little like individual moments, because there's actual meat there that could be, be chewed on.
It definitely has the best moments, and it has the message kind of going for it, I guess. But to watch, I think it's the most boring part of the episode by and large. Again, outside of those couple of moments, I think again, all the stuff at the start with all the fluffy stuff at the start and all the Ferengi ship at the start, all of it's completely irrelevant to the episode. Ultimately,
yeah, it's fine enough.
It's entertaining to watch.
Yeah, it's fine enough in the moment as you're watching it, because you don't realize it's not important. But once you get to what the episode's actually about, you're like, all of that was kind of irrelevant. It was just filler until we got to this part. Why weren't we spending that time getting this going so that everything had more weight and they had time to explore the ideas a bit better? So yeah, it really feels like 2 or 3 different scripts that were unfinished that someone said, hey, we can just throw all those together and get a stew going. But it was not a stew. It was a pail of different parts. I'm sorry.
Deconstructed stew.
Deconstructed stew. Aye, whatever. So yeah, it's just a real misfire, honestly. It's just funny because last episode wasn't that great either, but it did have that central thing for Picard and Beverly that, at least that stuff on its own, felt like, okay, there's some good character stuff here that still feels important to the development of these characters. I don't know if there's anything in this that feels like, this is important.
I think there's a real danger of what's happening right now. In my head, it's just occurred to me, is they know they're getting to the end of the show. They know they're finished, and they're just going, well, what scripts have we got left over that we haven't used yet? What can we use?
I mean, we'll see how many of them feel like that, but this definitely was a rough.
That's 2 in a row where we've felt that to some extent.
Yeah, and more, this one more so than the last one, I would say, but it.
Yeah,
I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, we did say how disjointed like the A plot and the B plot were last time. But this was even worse than that, because this wasn't like, because at least that was 2 full plots that at least somewhat worked on their own each,
and they were running concurrently.
Yes.
Whereas this was just section after section after section that were all completely unrelated.
Pretty much, yeah. Very strange. So I don't know. I mean, we'll see where it goes from here. But I can't say I was all that enthralled with this one. And the fact that Deep Space Nine's like just continuously getting better alongside it is not making this any easier to consume. It's starting to feel like these even season 7 episodes of Next Gen are like the chore we have to get through to get to the Deep Space Nine episode next.
Yeah, it does feel that way a little bit.
Which is not to obviously knock this show for any of its greatness that it's had, because it's had so much great stuff over its run.
It's a shame though. It just feels like more of a punishment for sticking with it instead of a reward.
Yeah, but to be fair, like almost everyone I've talked to about Next Gen has said, yeah, season 7 is the worst one. You just kind of have to, other than the finale, which is meant to be quite good. Everyone says season 7 is clearly weaker than.
You've just got to like finish it out of obligation's sake, basically, at that point.
Yeah, and 6 as well. Technically, I think everyone says is not as good as like 3 through 5. Like the greatness starts to
true.
Yeah, 2 starts to sprinkle in greatness, but it's 3 through 5 that everyone kind of looks at and says that's the golden years of Next Generation. 6 is still good and has some great stuff in it, but it's definitely less consistent. And then 7 here, where we're kind of experiencing the rough patch just now.
It's not quite as bad as season 1, but
No, because they have their own problems, for sure.
They do. I think this gets away with it a little bit more in that they can at least, if we spend 10 minutes with silly little fluffy stuff with Data and Geordi, we're probably getting more enjoyment out of that now than we would have if that was in season 1.
Yeah, possibly. It kind of depends, because in some ways, like, but I think you inherently forgive things in a season 1 a bit more because they're finding their feet a little bit. Whereas here, it's like they should know better by now.
we know they can do better than this. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of 6 and half a dozen, really. But if you look towards the next episode, which will come after the next Deep Space Nine, it's called Inheritance, and here's the description on IMDb. On Federation planet Atria 4, Data encounters the former wife of his creator, Noonien Song, who claims to be his quote-unquote mother. So
this could be amazing, or it could be terrible.
With no middle ground.
Given the season we're in, I'm assuming more likely the latter.
I mean, we'll see. I'm keeping an open mind.
What I was saying last time about one last big episode for each character. This definitely has the vibes of let's put a capper on all the Dr. Sung stuff.
I mean, we still have enough episodes that could all get 2 big episodes each before we're done. So we've got some time. It may not be the last big Data episode, but certainly it feels like we're doing. It feels like
more, but because that specific plot, like the stuff with Dr. Sung, has been a pretty consistent thread going back a long time at this point. So it feels like it's a capper on that side of things at least.
Sure. Maybe there'll be a lower episode later.
I wouldn't be surprised.
All right. That has been our thoughts on this Star Trek Next Generation episode. Let us know what you think of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Helps us out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, which will support both this channel and the movie channel where all the movie podcasts live. So go check out those if you haven't. But that is us. So thank you very much once again for joining. We do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. And somewhere out there, Wesley Crusher is also got a big crack.